For the vote.
Is there objection? Without objection.
Mr. President, I want to first of all thank Senator Merkley for his leadership on the resolution and for his thoughtful and substantive contributions as a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and to express my deep disappointment that our Republican colleagues are blocking his resolution, which basically says that we should not move forward on a nominee, in this case this nominee, when there are false statements to the IRS and to the Foreign Relations Committee, which he refuses to correct the record, which would have consequences. Those are indisputable. And it's abundantly clear that we need to formalize some standards that apply equally to all nominees, Democrat and Republican alike. And we should think of it as a floor beneath which the Senate should not fall. Now, it's amazing to me that I know my Republican colleagues used to care about tax issues. As a matter of fact, they denied a previous distinguished majority leader of the Senate on some arcane issue the opportunity to become the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And they've done it a bunch of times. This issue is a $4 million tax issue in which Mr. Pack took his nonprofit, totally controlled by him, and had all the monies that were solicited to the nonprofit then sent to his for-profit company, totally controlled by him, and no other disbursements were made from the nonprofit for anyone else, for any other entity. Now, I didn't hear until now that the Justice Department and the IRS has reviewed this. It should be forthcoming then, that they've cleared it, that this is now the course of business. We can create a nonprofit, go ahead, get monies from people, they'll get their deductions, and then we can send it to ourselves for profit. That's one heck of a process. Now, the chairman continues to say 2 years. Well, 2 years ago, there was a Republican chairman of the committee, our colleague Bob Corker. He did not move this nomination 2 years ago. So this constant refrain of 2 years, I guess you want to blame former Senator Corker for not moving it during that period of time. At the chairman's request, I met with Mr. Pack. While he may not have been my nominee, I agreed to have a hearing, which is one of the standards we have in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. There's an agreement between the chair and ranking. Now, that's been violated for Mr. Pack. He actually went to a vote for the committee without my agreement. So that comity has been violated for the future. And at the end of the day, we have someone who will not ultimately, he says, yes, I made a quote-unquote mistake. It's a $4 million mistake. And yes, I should have answered differently. Well, why not correct it? If it's so simple, if it's so benign, why not correct it? The reason you don't want to correct it is because there are consequences that flow from that correction, including probably an IRS investigation. And finally, it's interesting. I guess when Attorney General Barr does something, it's not political. But when the Attorney General of the District of Columbia does it, it's political. I didn't know we were going to start choosing and picking which law enforcement entities are political in this country. The Attorney General of the District of Columbia had an investigation that was proceeding before any action of the committee, or any information brought to the attention of the Attorney General. Evidently, he considers it significantly serious enough, potential IRS violations and taxes. So here's our Republican colleagues who in the past railed against anyone who had violations of the IRS tax code and saying they are not worthy of being a nominee, to going ahead and ramming through someone who ultimately has some serious issues to the tune of $4 million, and that's not a problem. Under investigation, that's not a problem. So I urge my colleagues to consider what you're doing here. Not only was a precedent set in the committee, but you'll set a precedent on the floor. And it will be very hard for you to get up and rail about somebody's tax liabilities and what they did and didn't do honestly with the taxes at the end of the day. With that, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
Senator from Nebraska.
I have 7 requests for